Welcome to our Farmer Mental Health, a research focus session. My name is Marnie Wood, and I will be your facilitator for this morning's session. Before we get started, I will review some quick housekeeping notes, and then I will introduce our speakers to begin our session. I would like to draw your attention to the bottom of your screen. You can use the chat feature to submit questions. Please type question in all caps in the chat before your question to make it easier for me to find them. The presenters will be taking questions at the end of the presentation. We will do our best to ask as many questions as we can during the time we have. Please ensure your microphone is on mute until the Q&A portion of the session. Please note that we'll be recording this session to upload the conference website for future viewing by those who have registered for the conference. You will be able to access the platform for 90 days following the conference. Lastly, I would like to respectfully ask all of those attending today's session to engage with each other thoughtfully and always consider the impact of your words and interactions on others. I would now like to introduce our presenters for this session, Dr. Rebecca Purc-Stephenson, Shelley Thompson, and Cynthia Beck.
Okay, so I'm going to present first. I'm going to share my screen with you. I'll maybe get a thumbs up to ensure that you can all see it. Perfect. Okay, welcome to this presentation. My name is Rebecca Purc-Stephenson. I'm a professor of psychology at the University of Alberta. For my research talk, I am going to share the findings from a recent study that we explored, investigated rather the stressors of farming life. In particular, we were struck with the high rate of suicide among farmers, not just in Canada, but globally. And as you'll hear today, so many farmers experience the same types of stressors. However, not all of them die by suicide. And we are interested in understanding the circumstances and risk factors that contributed to a farmer's decision to die by suicide, and how some farmers were able to navigate these enduring stresses while others did not. And perhaps there was a way to model this relationship in a theoretical framework to better capture those complex relationships. Okay. Moving along here, before I get started, I should share a little bit about myself and our team. So I'm the lead researcher of AgKnow, and that is the Alberta Farm Mental Health Network. This is a joint initiative between Erica and the University of Alberta. And we have a really strong team of undergraduate researchers where I am at. And we began working in 2021, and we officially formed in 2022. And our goal aligns really nicely with so many other programs that are emerging across the country. We aim to promote the mental health and well-being among farmers and family members so that they can lead fulfilling and productive lives. So let's get right into the research study. So I'm going to start with some background for context first. And so there is a wealth of research showing that farmers experience a range of personal and occupational stressors that place them at an elevated risk for poor mental health and suicide. So these could include experiencing a work injury and chronic pain, social isolation, long working hours. It could be animal disease outbreaks, etc. And instead of presenting those as just a long list of factors, some have wondered, is there an organizing framework for which to understand these stressors better? And I have one of them presented here for you, and that's the World Health Organization social ecological model. And in this framework, individual, interpersonal, social, community factors are believed to influence suicide behavior. And the most existing research on farmer stress can be categorized into one of these different nested layers. Now, the only problem with this model is that it doesn't show, it's quite static. It doesn't actually show the relationships between the different factors or the relative importance of some factors. Perhaps there's some variables that in combination are most critical. Okay. Now, what are some of the consequences of poor mental health and these occupational stressors? So for one, In more recent years, there's been ongoing research reporting on the poor mental health of farmers and how they experience higher rates of burnout, depression, anxiety, chronic stress than the general population. The stigma also remains quite strong in farming communities, and it may prevent some individuals from seeking help when they would benefit from it most. For example, stigma towards mental health and the cultural values of stoicism and self-reliance among farmers remains quite strong. Further, there's previous research that shows that farmers and agricultural workers, so those are individuals who own, operate, and work on a farm, have higher rates of suicide than any other occupation. And for example, data from the National Violent Death Reporting System in the US, they analyze database statistics. They found that there was a higher rate of suicide among agricultural workers, including farmers, than the national average. So that was an interesting point for us that we want to explore further. What were the life circumstances? So that brings us to, what don't we know right now? So there's a lot of quantitative studies that report on common demographics and statistics that might place farmers at risk, but we don't know what were some of the, what was going on in a farmer's life, maybe in the months or days prior or leading up to the suicide. And over the past 2 decades, there's been a growing body of qualitative research that has investigated farmer suicide from the perspective of significant others, relatives, or those who work directly or closely with farmers. And then such data provides an opportunity to examine the underlying issue from the perspective of these individuals who have an intimate understanding of the life situation that may have, contributed to the farmer suicide. So in this way, qualitative data can give us some in-depth, detailed picture of the experiences that surveys alone or database statistics can't really capture easily. So in an attempt to fill this gap, we conducted a synthesis of all qualitative research using a methodology called meta-ethnography. And this incorporates the strengths of a traditional review where you systematically search the literature and apply a criteria to have a certain number of studies, but it combines the direct words of participants and it translates concepts across studies to produce a narrative. So in this way, this methodology is this meta-synthesis of qualitative studies is quite strong. So the purpose of our study, it was simply we wanted to understand what are the risk and protective factors associated with farmer suicide from the perspective of people who knew them best or knew them well. And we wanted to use this information to generate a model or a framework to help understand the pattern of relationships. Okay. So what does this methodology involve? What does it look like? This is a quick snapshot of what we did, but it was actually the longest part of the study. And it looked a lot like this. Essentially, we searched for all electronic databases and the internet and hand search for all research studies that were related to farming and suicide, and they could be conducted anywhere in the world. And all of these studies that we found, and there were hundreds, they needed to meet certain criteria and to be included in our final study sample. So in this case, it could be that we needed studies to have a qualitative methodology so that they used interviews or focus groups and included quotes from the actual participants. And then we sorted through all of those articles and we ended up with 13 articles that met our criteria. And these studies were from all over the world, mostly from the US, the UK, Australia, Canada, and India. Okay. So I'm going to then spend the rest of the presentation explaining our findings, which we're really telling and are consistent with what's already in the literature. And the first one was a very prominent theme, and it dealt with maintaining a farmer identity. And for each of these themes that I'll describe, I attach a quote that best captures the nature of it. So in terms of maintaining farmer identity, what is that? Farmers who died by suicide, particularly men, were described as hardworking, strong, private people who took great pride in being the stoic breadwinners of their families. They were often remembered as members of this unique and fading culture who were otherwise poorly understood by outsiders. And in many cases, the farm had been passed down from generations. So that farming was not just a job, but it was a lifestyle. And farmers were also quite bonded then, not just with the job, but also with the place and their role. Many of these individuals had also faced some significant health issues that prevented them from sort of experiencing like the full want of that farmer identity. Next, we had, was financial crisis. So financial crisis was that farmers tended to experience a series of significant challenges and setbacks. And these may have been uncontrollable circumstances such as a crop failure, maybe market regulations or government regulations or changes that left the farmers stressed with mounting debt, and it accumulated to a point where they felt there was no way out. And then the third one here, sorry. I have two screens open. The third one was family, salvation or stress. This was one of the examples where family was both a risk factor and a stressor. So in some cases where the farmer had sort of multiple roles and dimensions on a family farm, that was a protective factor. But we often found that there were instances of separation and divorce that were leading up to suicide. Moving along, another area where it was both a protective factor and a risk factor was the role of community. And we called this the community panopticon. And if you live in a rural area like I do, if I change anything within 24 hours, I'm either getting a phone call or so everyone knows. So in many ways, the community can be a protective factor in engaging a farmer in activities and events, but at the same time, there's farmers felt that their decisions would be seen or judged by others. Next was isolation from others. So this was quite a simple one, very common, is that farmers tended to work alone a lot of the time, especially in certain areas, certain commodity types, like crops and stuff, not so much vegetable farming where you might have a large labor force with you. Okay. And then the last two was access to toxins and firearms. So these were, farmers had relative ease to access these and knew how to use them. And the final theme was, and we just labeled as unpredictable environment. There were just a number of these uncontrollable circumstances that farmers might find themselves in. And it might be poor weather, changes in market or government regulations, equipment breakdown, pests, etc. So we could have stopped there, as many studies do, and this is our list of factors that are related to poor mental health. But this type of research methodology that we are using necessitates that you do something with these. You try to figure out what is the common thread of these themes, right? How do they relate to each other in a way that can be applied to all of the studies, right? And it's a way of helping to, stimulate research and hypotheses. So that's what we did. And this also took a long time. And from this analysis, we developed a framework, which we called the Farming Adversity Resilience Management, or FARM framework. And I'm going to break it down for you. So we'll start with these two rings that you see here. So what we found was that farmers had generally two goals. They were, wanting to maximize food or textile production while also trying to maintain the family farm. And the intersecting nature of these rings meant that there was some sort of codependency, right? If you do well in one, you might raise up the other. If you're not doing so well in another, it drags the other one down. And the sort of the nature of these rings reflects how you might be, if you're a farmer, you might be sort of on this growth curve up, right? You're doing all of the things that maybe you had learned and had worked in the past, and you're sort of stable, right? Things are good. Things are rolling along. You're doing the farming practices because that's what's always worked. Until you encounter a stressor. We have the stressors represented in this box here. Maybe there's any sort of trigger. Maybe it could be, family related or some sort of stressor in the environment, but it requires you to somehow change what you're doing. The practices that you were doing before are no longer working, And if you continue those practices, you're going to see this breakdown. There's going to be a downward turn in maybe your well-being. And the way to bring it up is to maybe access some protective factors, right? And maybe it's changing your practices, it's maybe accessing support. And this also requires that those are available to you. For those farmers who are able to access them, they might change their practices, whatever their beliefs, their values, and then they maybe move up to this growth and stability until they have to maybe do the cycle again. But however, those individuals who were at risk for suicide, what we found is that they didn't use these supports. And essentially, they were maybe dragged down through either ring or even both to a point where they were at risk or in crisis for poor mental health. So that was a really quick snapshot of this. And this brings us to the end of the conclusions here of my presentation. So what did we learn? We learned that it wasn't just one type of stressor that put farmers at risk, but rather the close succession and cumulative impact of these stressors was quite damaging, especially when they did not access any support, so they were not available. This could lead to, say, high levels of burnout. In terms of help seeking, what we found is that traits such as stoicism, independence, privacy might actually be maladaptive, right? They actually might prevent someone from seeking help. And then interesting finding was how family and partners and community can be both a stressor and a protective factor. Oops, go back here, jumped ahead, doesn't want me to say this slide. So what are we doing now? Our call to action as part of AgNo and the University of Alberta and working with some of our other partners is to investigate these topics further. So this study provided us like a really solid foundation for understanding the landscape of stressors. And we have a series of studies that are underway right now. And if you're interested in learning any more about them or connecting with me, you are welcome to contact me. I have my information there, but just thank you so much for taking the time to listen to my presentation.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing that incredible work that you are doing. I would just like to take this. Dr. Purc-Stephenson is going to have to, is excusing herself shortly. So I wonder if there are any specific questions for her. If you want to put them in the chat, or you can raise your hand. Maybe we can start with Dr. Brianna Hagan.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
I can.
Rebecca, thank you so much for that wonderful presentation. I know that this is a very specific researchy question, but I think this is the right forum for that, as we are in the research session. I was wondering if you might be able to talk a little bit about the parameters you used for your search. As someone who has also conducted systematic reviews, I know how much work goes into that portion of the synthesis. So I was wondering specifically how you decided where to conduct your search, which databases, gray-lit sources, and if you put any time parameters on when the study was conducted, and then just why or why not.
Yeah, no, all excellent questions. And these are if you're a researcher like us, right, we love these questions. So yes, we did. We actually had pretty loose eligibility criteria in order to collect as much data as possible, but also recognizing that when you do something like that, you might have a mess of stuff, right? You might have a lot of heterogeneity in your sample. So what we tried to do was that we conducted a search using a variety of electronic databases. And then from all of the studies that we found, we also checked their reference list and did some hand searching to make sure we collected everything. And we used a variety of keywords, including farm, agriculture, rural, self-harm, suicide, and then all the different types of qualitative methodology keywords that you might use. So that part was really exhaustive. And in terms of eligibility criteria, so essentially like from that big funnel of articles, right? And how did we select, sort them into sort of piles of keep or not keep? We had to ensure that there was enough data, right? So there actually were quotes. Sometimes you find that it's not. It had to be a research study, not an editorial or thought piece. And the data had to come from individuals who knew or were familiar with the farmer, right? So significant, the words from significant others, relatives, or individuals who work closely with that farmer. They had to be written in English or French, and they had to be in a peer-reviewed journal article or a dissertation. So we excluded conference proceedings, etc. And then we also conducted a quality appraisal, which is like a critical review of the study's methodology. So there is no guiding framework for like where that threshold is to include or not include a study, but rather we did this as a way to help the reader evaluate the credibility of the sources that we were using. So we had no time frame. We used no limitations in terms of where the research could come from, because we thought part of our analysis includes a geographical analysis. And so, for example, we had several studies from India. So all the studies had the same issues, but what we found in, say, India was that they were accelerated, right? Where say in a Western circumstance, there might be sort of the added effect of stressors that accumulate and contribute over a series of years to burnout and then perhaps suicide. Where in India, it was like 2 seasons, right? It was relatively quick. So it might speak to just the different pressures and context. But that's an excellent question.
Thank you very much. I'm just a couple more. The next question is, did you see much about faith as a protective factor?
That is an excellent question. We did not. So faith did not come up as a prominent theme, to one that was part of our themes. However, I think it might be, if you dig deeper into this topic, for example, you have like the community or family. I think that if you investigated that more closely, right? What does community mean? What kind of events are bringing people in and serving as a protective factor? I think there is research that shows that connecting to your church group or faith can be a protective factor. So I'm drawing upon this also from what I know with post-traumatic stress, and that one of the ways that someone can be resilient to stressors is by drawing upon spiritual change and having a religious or spiritual framework to help understand the stresses in one's life. That's an excellent question too.
Great. And lastly, were there any differences in stressors and responses for different types of farmers? For example, rural versus urban, small scale versus large, commodity region?
Right. Also a very good question. So one of the things that really stood out was the idea of rurality. So the social isolation, so social and geographical isolation. So for farmers who may have worked in had crops, right, and where they may have had very few individuals working with them on a day-to-day basis, those were individuals who were most at risk, versus individuals who may have been part of like a larger team of individuals that work more regularly with each other. The protective factors seem to be able to simply be able to talk and bounce ideas and have a trusted source of someone who might ask you, like, how are you today? So yes, there were one of the quotes, I think I included it in the presentation, was really speaking to that, where you really do want someone to ask you, how are you today? And in some circumstances that wasn't there, but we didn't find that there were any granular differences between different types of livestock farming versus grain farming. This seemed to be quite broad brushstroke. Again, and this is an excellent area for generating or stimulating new research.
Wonderful.